Hello and welcome to Policy Watch, a packed snapshot of the week's biggest business developments, their context, their relevance and impact. I'm Govindraj, Ethiraj. Commerce Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has said that India and the United States have sorted out differences over WTO public stock holding for food security. The resolution would pave the way for the implementation of a global trade facilitation agreement stalled for months. Here's a report.
The standoff has finally ended. On Thursday, India signalled the WTO trade facilitation deal could now go ahead.
We are extremely happy that India and the United States of America have successfully resolved their differences relating to the issue of public stock holding for food security purposes in the WTO in a manner that addresses our concerns.
The trade facilitation deal was stalled because India wanted to keep a peace clause that protected its food procurements and food security concerns till the WTO struck a definitive deal. India's present proposal will now be reviewed by the WTO General Council next month.
We urge the WTO membership to take this forward in the General Council on behalf of the Ministerial Conference and pave the way to spurring the WTO to much more such successes.
The left, however, asked the government to reveal the terms it has agreed on the trade facilitation agreement.
We don't know what India has agreed to, because the USA is very clear they want unbridled access to our agricultural markets.
In the December 2013 Bali conference, India expressed concerns that agreeing to trade protocols could compromise its food security plans. The WTO agreement removes trade barriers but caps food subsidies to 10% of total food grain production. India objected to the calculation of subsidies that took 1986 as the base year and completely ignored inflation and currency fluctuation. India agreed to the facilitation agreement in Bali only under the condition that developing nations will get interim relief and face no sanctions till 2017. The present agreement between India and US comes just before the G20 summit this month that will see the presence of both US President Barack Obama and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
Well, joining me now to discuss this are Brinda Jagirdar, former Chief Economist of the State Bank of India, and Pashupati Advani, founder Global Foray. Thank you so much for being with here. So, Dr. Jagirdar, let me begin with you. First question, what does this mean for India?
First of all, after almost 2 decades, we've got 160 countries coming together and an agreement seems to be in sight. You remember the precursor to the WTO, the GATT, that used to be called the General Agreement to talk and talk. So now at least we seem to be getting some action. Having said that, I think it's also very good that India's concerns have been taken on board. Apparently the fine print is still not very clear, but what is agreed is that India does have a concern. We need to feed millions, more than 400 million poor. So I think this concern has been accepted globally, and I think that's a big victory for India, I should say. What India was opposing was that that we have about more than 80% of the land holdings are small farmers, and our productivity levels also much lower. And also on the manufacturing side, the value addition has been going down, domestic manufacturing as well as exports. So once these are not very strong, to open up the economy to trade would be a little premature.
Okay.
But at the same time, we do need to have trade facilitation, and I think that's what India was also working towards. What do we see in our ease of doing business? So it's a good thing when we have easier trade, because it brings down the cost, it reduces the time.
And we're talking about a $1 trillion addition potentially if customs tariffs were to be brought down,
and
20 million jobs being created. All of that. Okay, Pashupati, quick question here. What's your sense? I mean, is this another piece of good news that will help us in the global stage?
Well, you know, the idea of having trade and lifting trade barriers is always more efficient, and I think that has been done. As Professor said, that it's the real issue is that we wanted to protect the very poor that we need to feed, and that was being viewed as a subsidy. And I think the fact that it's going to be taken out of the WTO actually allows the whole world to sign on the dotted line. The issue is then will come as to the environment and this, global warming things, which are also in the back burner. But those will be the next issues, and we're not so involved in those as the US is, for example.
Yes,
let me just add here, it's not been completely taken out of the WTO. What has happened is, they said earlier it was at till 2017. That's the time we had. Now it has been taken indefinitely. So till a final agreement is reached among all countries. So I think that seems a little fair.
So let's understand where we stand, right, as a global economy. How are things looking for either us as a country to benefit or take advantage of a improved trade facilitation environment?
Global trade has suffered because of the global slowdown. So clearly that needs to be revived. But before we can revive global trade, global economies need to strengthen. We have the US picking up, we have the Indian economy showing signs of growth, but Europe is still bouncing at the bottom. And Japan doesn't seem to be reviving anytime fast. China seems to be slowing down big time. So all this is really going to impact global trade. But the moment we make it easier to do trade, especially among South Asian countries and Asian countries in general, then perhaps that would add to the momentum, the buoyancy in trade.
Okay. So you're saying overall things are looking steady but not necessarily great, and they may pick up, but either way we would be prepared for that.
Yes.
So let's look at the internal part of the economy now. Now all this was about food subsidies, right? Now what is the government doing or can do to ensure that either way we use this as an opportunity to improve the food subsidy situation?
Food subsidy, let me just also put this in some context, that India has spent something like about 13.8 billion on food subsidy, and US just on 5 crops, I think rice, wheat, cotton, soya, corn, just these 5 crops, US is subsidizing to the extent of 20 billion, and it also subsidizes its farmers not to produce. So really they're not comparable in that sense. We are subsidizing to make sure that food reaches the poorest. So in that sense it's not comparable. And China, I think it's something like 160 billion. Europe is more than say 27 billion. So I think these are huge numbers. So we need to see that
$60 billion.
So we need to see that in context, the subsidy, and not jump and say that this is trade.
No, fair enough. So but I'm saying we have our own problems, either of delivering subsidies or ensuring that subsidies actually work. So to what extent can this be used to improve the situation back home is the question.
I think it's already being done, because the cash benefit transfer, if that comes in, then we'll see a lot of leakages being stopped, and targeted delivery will be there. So yes, as you rightly said, this is an opportunity for us to put our house in order. The Make in India, improve manufacturing capacity so that we can trade, and also to improve the subsidy delivery.
Right. So one part is of course agriculture. The non-agriculture part, which you just touched upon, are we in a position to actually take advantage, or could we get hurt?
No, right now we could get hurt because we don't have our infrastructure in place, and we don't have a vibrant manufacturing sector, which would, so therefore we could get hurt. But then, like I said, this is an opportunity for us to gear up and really go all firing on all cylinders. So we need to.
Pashupati, trade or manufacturing?
Well,
the Make in India and all of that.
Yeah, but obviously the Make in India is needed, because one of the things that was happening is that we were just buying things from China, and at least at the bottom commodity end, we were just, it was an outgo of foreign exchange. Every policy decision that Prime Minister Modi is taking is being taken with an idea to create jobs here and to create solid manufacturing here. And I think it will take time. I mean, according to me, it's at least one cycle, so 5-6 years. But at that point, at least if our manufacturing is competitive, then we will be able to stand up on our own 2 feet. Till then, we are a boxer which is being punched, and we're slowly getting up, and making sure that we don't get punched again. So we're dancing, and while we're dancing, we've got these things like trying to stop the WTO from getting signed. So now they've agreed, because they're trying to get us to move quicker on all these things. But I think at the end of it all, if our Make in India thing gets done, which it looks like it's going to, because incentives are coming in and the infrastructure comes in, and we become competitive manufacturing wise, then we are forced to reckon with.
Okay, Brinda, what are your other concerns, or what are the issues that we have to now tackle and very quickly get moving on?
We have to get the economy, like we have to get the economy moving. There's no doubt about that. The latest data, IIP data, which came out, if you take the first 7 months together, the economy does seem to, the industrial sector does seem to have performed slightly better, 2.8% as against negative last year during the same period. Manufacturing also 2% growth as against negative last year. So, but this just shows green shoots are on, but we've got to take this forward much faster, at a much faster pace and on a much larger scale. So as Mr. Pashupati said, it's the jobs that are important, but even the production that needs to come on to the markets, that's very important.
Okay. Pashupati, what's your sense? I mean, is this sending, or rather what kind of signals is this sending to global investors? You were at a big institutional investors conference just recently.
Yeah, I mean, basically the signal is that India is changing for the better. Policy decisions are going to get made, and don't expect things to be super fast, because it's like turning a super tanker, but that we are here to stay and we are definitely a player. And nobody now equates us with Pakistan anymore. We get equated with China. So even in perception, we are being considered seriously simply because of our large population and our large GDP. And I think that's here to stay.
Okay. So last question, Brinda, what's your sense about this whole deal actually materializing the way it's supposed to materialize? I mean, you know, there are some concerns about fine print, for instance.
That we still don't know. Like I said, what is it that India has given and what made the US actually come around? So is the peace agreement, as they say, so peace clause. So the details of this peace clause are, I think those are not yet very clear, but it is a good move that at least all the countries have got together. They are aware of the concerns of one another, of the other countries, and trying to move forward all together. So because globalization's character had changed, it had become more regional and more, the regional trade agreements seem to be growing. So I think this will be one step forward for global agreement.
So should we then be also looking at complementing this with more regional agreements?
I think yes, we'll need to do that also, because with some countries where we have
we've got G20 coming up, but we've also got the Prime Minister on tour, on to Australia now, so
yes.
you know, from Southeast Asia.
That's right. So it will, I think the regional trade agreements will go on in tandem, but at the same time we can't lose sight of the overall global trade agreements.
Well, we need to take a break on that, but we'll come back after the break and we'll talk about the stock markets, which have hit an all-time high, closing above 28,000 for the first time this week. Stay with us. Hello and welcome back to Policy Watch. The stock markets hit an all-time high of 28,000, closing above that critical mark for the first time in history. According to experts, auto and banking indices were the star performers and were up 1.35% and 1.3% respectively. The domestic sentiment remained upbeat on continued buying by foreign funds as well as retail investors. The markets hit an all-time high. Still with me, Pashupati Advani and Dr. Brinda Jagirdar. Pashupati, let me begin with you. So obviously we're all happy that the markets are going up, but what does it really mean? Because we also know for a fact that we don't have the kind of width of investors participating like before.
You know, the fact of the matter is that, you know, we are part of the emerging markets class. And the reason why we are as buoyant as we are is because the B and the R of BRIC seem to be both having a lot of issues. In Russia is having serious issues, and you know, they're talking about locking it up for trade, and people are therefore taking money out. And Brazil also has got its own set of problems at the moment. So, and China also has been kind of nondescript. And whatever, you know, new inflows, you had Alibaba come to market. So all of a sudden, you know, it sucks all the new inflows into China. So one of the things that's happening is we are benefiting because of this marginal money coming to us. And I've always been a believer that money is actually what drives markets rather than actual valuations. Because if you were to look at our market objectively, we're probably slightly overvalued. But you know, it is the dream of things to come, and I think that's what's taking things forward.
Okay, so you're saying the external factor, notably capital flows, is what's keeping the markets up, as they have perhaps for the best part of this century.
And the month so far has been good. In fact, the numbers in November have been better than they've been in a lot of the last 3 or 4 months in terms of net inflows.
Okay, so we'll come back to the inflows and what's driving the markets in a moment. Brinda, the other 2 or 3 factors that are driving the markets is obviously the IIP numbers, the inflation numbers. There's a sense, and of course oil going down. So there's a sense that all the macroeconomic numbers are lining up neatly in favor of the markets.
That's right. Internally also, besides the external factors, yes, we do seem to be doing well. Inflation has come down and looks like it's going to trend downwards. And IIP is improving, is picking up. On the fiscal side, a lot of effort is being made, but that does seem a little difficult. And on the current account side, we do have very good numbers, helped perhaps also by the softening oil prices. Okay. But you know, gold imports this month have suddenly shot up, and given the gold prices, I think, you know, this is going to be a challenge to keep gold imports down. down. But yes, we have a very interesting, a very fortunate confluence of all these factors, which is really helping the economy, and sentiment has improved too.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll come back to the largest economy in a moment. So gold imports is a good point, Pashupati, because that's really what's also keeping money away from the financial markets, isn't it?
Well, in a sense, I think the people who are buying the people who are buying gold are not necessarily the people who are buying the stock markets.
Okay.
It's just that people are looking at gold, which was 30,000 rupees 6 months ago, and now it's at 25,000. So all of a sudden it's 1/6 cheaper. But actually that brings in one very important point, which is that where is the dollar and the rupee going to go? I think that's what's going to be the sort of game changer, because if tomorrow the rupee goes to 70, then whatever gains you made in the stock market are thrown out the window in USD terms.
Right.
And I think that's, if
but
you
why
ask
is that
people,
a concern for you?
well, it's a concern because all the money that we're trying to attract is dollar money or foreign money. So if they're not making a real return, then they're going to go away.
When you say, are we trying to attract, meaning either whether we try or not, that's the money that's coming in and
Correct.
keeping the markets
Correct.
up, because mutual funds actually have been withdrawing, if anything.
No, I think mutual funds also had got money. They're getting marginal savings money, but it's very small compared to what's coming in from overseas. And I think that has always been the driver. And against that, we've always had new products. So when we say 10 billion is coming from overseas, all of a sudden we have 20 billion of new issues potentially. We've got PSUs, we've got good quality corporates coming to market. They're coming in with all sorts of hybrid instruments. Some are coming directly overseas. So as far as the India allocation is concerned, they are actually taking some of this money away. And so you're seeing every day in the markets 500 crores, 400 crores, 300 crores net inflow, which is good.
So what is so what's your sense of the markets as a whole? So if we are we've crossed the 28,000 mark, which is a good psychological mark to cross. Where could we go from here, and how much steam is still left?
I think that we are going to continue to slowly move upwards, simply because policies are coming through one after the other, and they're coming through in a sort of steady fashion. So the story is still good. If there's anything that disturbs the story, like a big shock, like for example, if gold imports go so crazy that we have a huge minus number, then all of a sudden people will say, what the hell is going on in this country? But so far it seems to be managed. And oil prices, as Professor Brinda said, that have gone down. So that's a big plus for us. And for us, our stars are right.
Okay. So does this mean that we can actually see investors coming, or let me put it this way, should investors be coming into the market at this time, or should they be staying away? Because the fact is the markets have also run up more than 30% in the last year.
But the fact is that there are some people who are still not exposed to India who want to be. So they'll
I'm
come
talking
in.
about domestic investors.
No, domestic investors, again, this has always been the market where you have to choose stocks. And I think that, our domestic investors are not in the front line, which are the indices, they're in the second line. And they are cherry picking within those stocks based on themes. The obvious believer is to be in stuff that is in stocks that are actually going to benefit from the domestic consumption story. And those are going to be the winners.
Okay.
And if you look back, there have been, simple things like cement manufacturers and tile manufacturers and, housing manufacturers, which have done very, very well. And so we have to keep finding those themes and finding out what's going on. Now again, low cost housing, affordable housing, that's a theme. Cement is a theme, steel is a theme. Those are things that are going to continue to go up as we industrialize, as our infrastructure gets better.
Right. So, and which brings me back to the larger economy question where we left off with you, Brinda. How does, what are we sort of having, are we seeing the right preconditions for continued and sustained economic growth?
I think we are.
It's a very large question, but nevertheless.
I'll see the macros, the markets, and the makers, the policy makers. They seem to be in alignment. So I think we are really we're in a very sweet spot. The macros are very comfortable, as we just discussed, and they seem to be continue to be in this moment because the new policies that are coming in, as Mr. Pashupati just mentioned, if we see these coming one after the other sequentially, then there will be a lot of interest still remaining in India, and we will see growth picking up.
Okay.
So that's so far as the macros are concerned. The markets, so macros are saying yes, this is the right time, and we can see we can move forward. Maybe that it's right to cut the rates at this time. The markets are saying, oh, we've already done it, and they are moving ahead. And the policy maker says, hang on, I just not so fast yet.
Okay.
So I think that's the only alignment.
So what will the maker do about the interest rates is the question.
I think he will wait in December.
Or what should the maker be doing about the interest rate?
I think he will wait because it's too early. Inflation has come down, but it's only vegetable inflation that is down. Milk, fruits, eggs, these prices are still high, and India's had double-digit food inflation for the last 3 years. So we need to just be a little watchful at this moment, and we still have time in Feb.
So you're sounding now almost exactly like the Reserve Bank Deputy Governor.
No, I think a lot of analysts and economists are saying this. So I think it's
okay. Pashupati, is that a concern? I mean, interest rates, whether they come down or not, because that in turn is the long-term kicker for industrial growth. And
yeah, but
I
actually think that this government has a 5-year timeline, of which only 6 months has gone, or 4 months has gone. So I think these things will come down. I actually think that we are at sort of 8% type CD rates, which will probably come down to 6% in 2 years' time. Now, whether it comes from 8 to 6 in 1 year and 8 months, or whether it starts from next February, is not the issue. I think the game is to get it done in stages. Like this is the target, to be at 6% in 2016 this time, and how we get there is our problem. So
So you're saying that in a way, interest rates or high interest rates are not necessarily something that are working against, at least from a market point of view.
No, it's a toss-up between high interest rates and keeping inflation, because obviously with higher interest rates you would have inflation. So they're trying to pull the inflation down and then bring the rates down, which is the correct way. And obviously as I said, it's a super tanker, so it takes time to react. And as Professor Brinda said, it's really a question of how soon it happens and what the macros are.
Right. So what's your sense in terms of specific areas that could actually see do better than others within the markets in the coming 2 or 3 months?
Well, I think that what's going to happen is there'll be unlocking of certain projects. I mean, the government has decided that they want to fast track the projects which have, let's say for example, there's a pipeline which has got 2 kilometers left. They want to finish all those and then let the benefits of that go through. And I think that in itself will create the spending, will create the demand, and create the jobs also. Because successful, India is a great country of copiers. Once you have successful projects, it's very easy to duplicate it.
Okay, so does that mean that therefore stock markets, companies which are having such projects listed on the markets are likely to see more?
Yes, because they'll unlock. Even if they don't have the money themselves, they may spin them off into SPVs and get fresh investment, which we're already seeing some of, and reschedule with the banks and just redo the whole project and get it finished. Okay. And then the key is getting it finished.
Okay, so the other big question, right? We've not met our disinvestment targets. I mean, at least so far. I mean, there is still some runway. But should the government be moving faster and at this point of time on this?
Well, I think that with oil at $80 a barrel, they don't really need to move as fast because the deficit's not going to be there. So yes, they should be moving on forward on those targets, but I don't think it's as essential.
But not because of deficit, because perhaps we want to create more good quality IPO supply and so on.
Well, again, it's a golden goose. You give too much, then the markets will come down, and then it becomes counterintuitive. So the timing is going to be very critical, and they are giving some reasonable IPOs, but then private India is also coming in. So it's a question of who gets there first.
So you're not expecting a problem of supply in the markets in the coming few months.
There's a wishful supply. There's a huge supply list.
Yeah.
The question is that the market is now being discerning and saying no to certain things.
Okay.
And I think that is what the difference between this cycle and the last cycle, where the market is actually discerning and saying we don't want to buy this investment. Okay. So don't give us rubbish, give us good quality. Okay. Or give us rubbish so cheap that it becomes good quality.
Okay. So overall things are looking good. Is where
I'm optimistic, and I think that very few, most people overseas also are saying there's no cause for concern, and therefore we are just matching the allocations. But I still don't see people overweight
on India.
On India.
Okay, and that's also because you're saying that there is other.
Well, there's concern about whether it can be delivered, and there's concern about the rupee.
Yeah.
Because if it can't be delivered, then we'll see it very quickly in the deterioration in the value of the rupee.
Right. And you're saying also there is money in a sense staying within the US rather than going out.
That also, because the US also the economy has taken off, so there is money getting attracted there as well.
Right, we've run out of time. Thank you very much for being with us. Well, that's all we have time for on this edition of Policy Watch. We'll be back next week, same time. Thanks for watching.